With our NPC health script set up and ready to go, we need to actually create a UI canvas that our enemies can use to display information about their health. And that's going to be what those get component calls and stuff that we added to the NPC health script, that's what that's going to reference. So what we want to do is drop down into our project folder because we need to make changes to our prefab so that all instances of our enemies in the world will get updated correctly. So we're going to click into the Techability folder from the Assets pane. You're going to go to NPCs. And we need to do this for both NPCs, so it doesn't matter which one you pick first. They're going to get the exact same thing. In fact, we're just going to copy one over to the other. So I'm going to start with the dungeon skeleton, but you can start with whichever one you want. So if you double click on it, it's going to open this blue background screen, and the only thing that'll appear in your hierarchy is just a TA dungeon skeleton. That's exactly what we want. What we're in right now is what's called the prefab editor, and this is essentially just a version or a form of the Unity editor, I should say, that allows you to edit one specific prefab, which is an object that we can then duplicate multiple times throughout the scene, and every update or every object we have will be updated accordingly with the changes we make in the prefab editor. Excuse me. So what we want to start by doing is right-clicking inside our dungeon skeleton here. We're going to go down to UI, and we're going to click Canvas. And that's going to make a canvas, but what the main issue we have here is that we get a screen space overlay canvas, which means that we're going to get a canvas that no matter where we put it is going to cover our whole screen. And that's not what we want. That's what we want for our player UI later on, but for this, we just want the UI elements to hover over top of our enemy. So in order to fix that, what we can do is click on screen space here in the canvas component and change that to world space. And now we've got a canvas that is oriented based on its position in the world. But the problem right now is that it's absolutely massive. If you look at if you click the canvas and press F, it'll zoom out and you'll get a sense for just how big this thing is. Whereas our skeleton, if we click on that guy, the BIP001 here, you'll see it's just, completely. It's just not even fathomable how much larger it is than our skeleton. So what we need to do is drop the size of that. So we're going to go into our rect transform component here at the top. The first thing we want to do is center it on our skeleton. So we're going to set position X, Y, and Z to 0. That's going to put the center right on our skeleton there. And then we can take this width, and we're going to drop that down to 100. And even that might be a little big still. Let's see. Yeah, that's still pretty big. Let's drop it down to 10. Yeah, there we go. That's a bit more appropriate. And even that's still technically a little big, but if it's it's not going to hurt anything if we have too much space. We just want to make sure that it's not, it's a reasonable workspace to work with, but again, it's not going to hurt anything if we have a little bit of extra space around our guy here. So once we've got our height specified and everything there, what we want to do is click on our canvas, right click, go down to UI, and we're going to add a text option. So this is going to be the object that holds the text for our enemy's health. And we need to make a couple of changes to the text component over here on the right. We need to change our color. So there's this color field down here. We want to change that to red so it's a little easier to see. We're also going to replace this new text here in this text field with 100, just because that's what our default health value is going to be. We also want to go to alignment and hit the center button and this center button. And now you'll see that it looks like our guy is massive, and it also looks like it's flipped backwards. So that's easy enough for us to fix. We're going to do two things to do that here. First, what we're going to do is drop our scale. So it says we're at scale 1 here. We don't want to drop it to negative. We're going to just scale that down. I'm doing that right now by pressing the R key with the text selected and pulling up the scaling gizmo. You can also just edit the number directly here if you'd like. I'm actually going to drop this down pretty far to say we'll say 0.05. I think that's good. 0.05. Yeah, that looks good to me. And what we're going to do to flip our canvas around here, actually, let's drop this down to 0.0025. Or or even 0.01 maybe. Yeah, we'll do 0.001. And then what we'll do instead is we'll crank up our font size to something like, how does 32 look? One other setting we need to change after we get our scale dropped is go down to where it says vertical overflow and hit overflow. Same thing with horizontal overflow. We want to change that to overflow. And this is a mistake that's pretty easy to make, and I made it here on accident as well. When you type your text in here, you do not want to hit the enter key. If you do, you'll add a new line, and you can see over on the left that that's bumping the text up. We don't want that. We want it to stay centered. So don't hit enter after you type 100. Just type 100 and then click off the text option to prevent that from happening. And then what we're going to do is move our text up so that it's right above our enemy's head here. We want to leave a little space because we're going to also add a health bar below that. But before we add the health bar, let's click back on our canvas and go to rotation. And in the Y value, we're going to type 180. And that's just going to flip it so that the text is facing forward with our enemy here. The next thing we need to do is right-click again on the canvas, drop down to UI, and hit slider. And that's going to make another massive object for us because our canvas is pretty big by default. So what we want to do to fix that is, just like we did for the text, we're going to scale it down, either using our scale tool here or just by changing the scale up top. I'll scale it down like this till I find a number I like, but I'm going to guess somewhere around 0.1 is going to be, or 0.01 is going to be what we want. Yeah, it looks like 0.01 will work for this guy as well. So I'm going to make that a nice round number. I don't like having these gross decimals when we don't need them. So we'll make it all scaled at 0.001 in our rect transform component here. And we'll position it so it looks nice above our skeleton here. Next, what we want to do is open up the slider in the hierarchy view. We're going to go to the handle slide area and expand that. And there's this handle object here. We can actually just disable the image component. That's going to get rid of that ugly looking knob. Next, what we want to do is click on the background object. We can change the color of that to red. And that'll give us a nice red background. And lastly, we want to click into our fill area object here and change that color to green. Cool. So now we've got a nice green and red, and it looks like a little bit more like a health bar and less like a big ugly slider. And again, in our NPC health script, we're going to do that get component in children, which is going to get us access to both the text and the health here. What we want to do next is actually select our canvas component, and you can right-click it and hit copy, or press Control or Command C. And then we're going to open up our other enemy NPC prefab. So I'm in the dungeon skeleton right now, so I'm going to open up the TA skeleton, and I'm going to collapse his body here. And just like we right-click to copy it, we're actually going to right-click on TA skeleton and hit paste as child. And that's gonna paste our canvas. Now, you'll probably have the same issue here where your canvas is way off center. That's okay. We're gonna do the same trick we did last time where we just put position X, Y, and Z to 0. And that'll center it, and it should be facing the same way. And then that means our two prefabs should be good to go. And if we hit the back button up here in our hierarchy view above our skeleton's name there, you will now see all of our skeletons on our island have this nice health bar and this nice health text floating above them. Our enemy canvases actually need one additional thing before we can move on, and we need to actually go back into our NPC prefabs in the Techability folder and NPCs, and we're gonna have to do this to each one individually. What we can do is go into the slider option, and we need to change our min and max values here. Right now, the maximum value we can have is 1, but our NPC health can go up to as high as 100. Any changes in the NPC health value won't be reflected unless the value falls between 0 and 1. And obviously that's not ideal. So what we want to do is just change this max value field to 100. And that's going to make it so that when our NPC health script updates the slider, those updates are reflected accurately. And I did this in my TA dungeon skeleton, so now we're going to swap over to the TA skeleton and open the canvas up, grab slider, and do the same thing. Just change max value of 1 to 100 and hit back. And now later on when we start dealing damage to our enemies, everything will be updated appropriately.